My great-grandfather was an innovator, and he was always an innovator and always thinking of what he can do with a fabric to make it different, to make it usable and appealing to the well-dressed man, and what could be practical. And so he essentially was the first of his kind to really come up with a product that was not mainstream. Dacron is a synthetic fiber that is woven into fabric for resistancy. Being the innovator that my great-grandfather was, he decided to make a trip to DuPont. So they had just come out with Dacron. And so he used the Dacron fibers at the mill to weave a fabric that would have resistancy, in particular, wash and wear. So that was his big idea. The big concept was to come up with a fabric that was wash and wear. So he really was the innovator, and I will also say inventor, of these synthetic fabrics that were specifically made for a purpose. It was for practical purpose. The first time I ever heard the story was from photos. So my great-grandfather passed away before I was born, and there were pictures all over the sitting room, but they always had photos around in the living room, upstairs, in their private space. And that's where we would go as young children and sit and visit with them. And that was the first time I ever learned about the story, was seeing photos of my great-grandfather. So once Haspel Brothers had success with taking these Dacron fibers and weaving them into a gentleman's suit to make a wash and wear suit, now it was time for him to prove his concept. It was perhaps the greatest PR stunt of all times, and had there been social media back then, this would have absolutely changed the world, and I like to think that it essentially did when you fast forward all these decades later into what the athleisure market has done in America. So my grandfather was in Boca Raton at a trade convention in the summer of 1946. And just picture him in his gentleman's suit, in his new wash and wear suit. Now, I don't know if there were 10 people on the beach or 1,000 people on the beach, but there were enough photographers around to capture this iconic moment in fashion history that to this day still gives me the chill bumps, that he was able to pull this off and to do this PR stunt that only he could think of. And the joke, a little bit of a jokester that he was. So he had on his first wash and wear suit. So he went out fully dressed in his full attire, and he walked out into the Atlantic Ocean, and he jumped around, splashed around, and he got out of the ocean, and he shook off, and he walked out onto the beach, and there were people who were starting to gather around him, and he literally went up the beach a little ways up to a fenced area, and he went to this area and he started taking off his clothes. Once again, the jokester that he was, obviously, he had on some boxer shorts, took off his suit, he hung it up on the fence to dry, and he made damn sure that there were people around to watch him take off his clothes and hang them up to dry. And at this point, no one could possibly have known who he was, why he did what he did. But the whole point in this PR stunt was that he was going to let it dry for a couple of hours. But he took that suit and he put it back on a little while later, and he wore the same suit to the trade show event, to the trade show dinner that evening. And I don't know what he smelled like. However, we know he looked good, and that was the whole point of the publicity stunt. Another purpose of the wash and wear suit was essentially that, was to be able to wash it at home in your washing machine, or whatever version of washing that people were doing back in the 1940s, and not have to take it to have it professionally cleaned. So it offered resistancy, from the water treatment, whether you're jumping into an ocean or washing it in a machine, but also a little bit of stretch. The benefits of what we know as athleisure and resistancy today, he was doing back in the 1940s. My great-grandfather was definitely more of the innovator, from making this wonderful fabric called seersucker into a gentleman's suit, got it into the Ivy Leagues, and really popularized the suit. And the innovator and the thinker that he was in going to DuPont to talk to them about these Dacron synthetic fibers. As we try to continue the tradition that my great-grandfather started all those years ago, we have gone to our mill to make sure that there is a proprietary interest in our seersucker fabric, and we have added 3% elastine for stretch, which is made in all of the seersucker suits that are produced today. While they're not wash and wear as they used to be, that is something that is near and dear to our hearts, and that is part of the thread and the fabric of our Haspel story. Haspel and water have always gone hand in hand. Back from when my great-grandfather did the publicity stunt in the Atlantic Ocean, to my grandfather, Joseph Haspel Jr., who was always jumping in his pool in his seersucker shorts and his board shorts, to today and to modern day, where we always have an element of water in all of our photo shoots, in our settings. It's our background, much like Bourbon Street in New Orleans is. Water has always been a component of how we market ourselves, because there is so much fun around pools and the ocean, and that's how we associate ourselves. Clothing meant for a good time, and then to have the opportunity to be the 4th generation Haspel, to carry on the entertainment and the voice that the Haspel family still has been so much fun to me, to be able to share that with the world, to share that with my kids, and hopefully they'll share that with their kids.